Good evening, everyone. How are we doing this Wednesday? Give everyone one more minute to dive in, and then we will kick off for our challenge adventure. Goggin, what's up?
So you guys completed the website, right? So I'm supposed to join in today?
Yeah, so yesterday towards the end of class, we covered Google Fonts, and we also
Your video paused for some reason.
interested in Prettier. Oh, my internet connection is unstable. That's fun. Let's give that a minute and see if it resolves itself.
Yeah, you were frozen for a good minute.
Okay, give me one. Okay, internet should be back. Sorry about that. Yesterday after break around 7:30, we covered Prettier for file indentation. We covered Google Fonts for using different fonts on the internet that aren't web safe. And we also covered material icons, of how to use material icons. So if you're interested in any of those three topics, I would watch yesterday's class from 7:30 on. But other than that, you haven't missed anything.
Okay, so I was not absent, so I was present that day, I guess.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
All right.
Looks like we have almost a full class. Just give me 1 second to catch up on Slack. Rain asked a great question in the chat. She asked, have we decided what we will build today?
I seen a little bit about I seen a little bit of yesterday. Was this supposed to be like were we supposed to pick like a social media website to recreate, or was it supposed to be like
Any website that you want? It could be social media. It could be a popular website that you use. It could be a website that you think would be particularly challenging to recreate. Hopefully not for my sake, but that is totally an option. The world is kind of open. And if you guys have it narrowed down to like a top 3, I can work through that list and kind of figure out which one I think would be the most helpful to watch. But it's really totally up to you guys. I'm seeing a lot of YouTubes in the chat, so but it's totally up to you guys.
Okay, I just have another question. Like, before everybody throw everything in the chat now, are we doing stuff? Should we like, I mean, I guess it don't really matter what we do, but should we do something that looks a little bit more aesthetically like easier, or something that look a little bit more complicated so we could like practice? Like, what should we be focusing on?
Up to you guys. I think focusing in on a web app is a really good idea. Only because your final capstones will be a web app with some layer of database or stuff like that. But it's up to you guys. You know, if you find a site where you're like, hey, this looks like a basic site, and I would really want to see how Max recreates this one simple site just so that I could try and do it on my own, you could also do that. I will say that our news site is very similar to Syracuse.com. In fact, Syracuse.com was the inspiration for the news site in terms of 3 columns. So I would probably avoid that one just because it's very similar, but that doesn't mean we need to rule out all news sites. So if there's another news site that you would like to try and see me recreate, we can also do that. I don't have any that I want to do the least quite yet. Google Maps would kind of be a little challenging right now because we wouldn't tackle the actual map, but we could tackle the entire interface around the map. And then as you guys get more experience, we could kind of circle back to that and learn how to use the Google Maps API in order to get the maps actually functioning in our own interface. So that's a cool option. Facebook has a very common web layout, so we could do that. Instagram may be a little bit more simple to recreate. It may feel a little bit more real by the time we're done with it. But that would certainly be a good one. Palash, I saw your hand raised. Do you have a question?
Sorry. Yeah, the only question was like, what level of interactivity will this site have? Is it just going to be like a screenshot of what we've been doing, or like
Yeah, for now we'll just focus on in on one page, and just getting that one page to look like whatever the source page is that we're trying to recreate. However, just like Google Maps, that doesn't mean that we can't come back to this project once we finish JavaScript or once we finish the APIs module and then try and layer on additional functionality on top of it. Or even when we get to full stack and making the database work. So whatever you guys decide is totally fine with me.
Why don't you poll like YouTube, Facebook, and
Sure, good idea. So we can do top 3 right now are probably Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. Any other contenders that we want to throw out?
One in the chat yesterday was like Amazon, so I don't know.
That's a good one. I'm going to leave it as multiple choice, and that way you guys can decide, like if you're between 2 of them, you can pick 2 of them off. So I'll say YouTube. I'm going to give a couple options too. I'm going to say YouTube homepage, YouTube video page. We'll say Facebook. What's your Facebook stream or whatever your like home feed is on Facebook? We'll say Amazon homepage, and then Amazon product page. And then I think Instagram really only has, I don't actually know what Instagram looks like on the web. I'm going to have to look at that one, but I think there's only one Instagram option. News feed instead of stream. Let me update that. We can definitely tackle this one. Is this one we can definitely add in. I have to
Question.
Yeah.
If we did like YouTube, would you be showing us how to like nest in the video links and add okay.
Yep. And I'm just looking to see if I can find MySpace is pushing my bounds of knowing what their interface looks like. So I'm just pulling up one. Just don't want to have to create a MySpace account. So I'm trying to find a good screenshot of MySpace that we can go off of.
Yeah. Does anybody still actually use? Because didn't they change like the whole MySpace like layout and stuff? Or does this? I wonder if it still looks the same.
I'm going to say MySpace circa 2008 because that's probably going to be one of the easiest ones to recreate. I'm looking at copy image address. This is the MySpace like image that I was looking at. So that's going to be like your most basic old school layout. But that is certainly something we can recreate. And it may be a little bit easier for you guys to follow along with if you choose to follow along. So I'm going to go ahead and open this poll. Sorry, I forgot to title it, but I'm going to let you guys vote in on any one of those and we'll see what the results looks like. And it is multiple choice. So if you're kind of between two of them, feel free, or three of them, feel free to check off as many as you want and then go ahead and vote for that. $11 out of 18 people voted in.
I just got one question. So with MySpace, are we learning how to build like? I mean, is it like one and the same or is it different? But are we learning how to actually do like those edited web pages, or are we just learning how to? Because
we would be remaking that screenshot that I posted in the chat. So functionality and all of that stuff, we're definitely going to learn. That's definitely covered in our curriculum, but in week 3, it's a little too early on to start touching on those features. So what we would do is we would build out that entire page right now. And then after we finish the JavaScript, or at some point in the JavaScript module and the API module and all of that stuff, we could totally come back and revisit this page and add in functionality if you guys were interested in doing something like that. That's totally fine with me. Just right now, we would focus in on just the visual aspect of it. All right. Only one person didn't vote in. This is a very close race, but we do have a winner, unless that one person wants to vote in and really screw with me. Going once, going twice. By one vote, we've got the YouTube video page coming in at the top. So while I pull that random YouTube video page up and make sure that I am knowing what I am in for recreating it, does anyone want to make a really strong argument for the Facebook newsfeed over a YouTube video? Because I think both of them are really great options.
I think if we make a YouTube homepage, we will learn more about like the layouts of the the channel names and all the things that come in, instead of just making the video page. And sorry, one second.
So the video page,
it's a little simple, I guess, if you just want to make it.
Not quite as simple as you think. So we've got a sidebar over here. We've got all of these little elements to deal with. We still have our top nav bar that we need to build out. We would touch on learning how to actually get a video element working within our own page and our own code. And then down here, we've got a pretty complex layout of buttons that we would need to tackle. We've got this little description area, and then we also have the comment section down here that we would want to build out. So there's a fair amount on this page. We wouldn't tackle it all tonight, But depending on how it goes tonight and how you guys are feeling, we could certainly work on this for the next 2 days, and then save Netflix and the portfolio page for next week. So it's kind of up to you guys. I don't think I'm signed into Facebook on this. Let me just see if I can get an easy screenshot. Facebook news feed. So this is probably a good example. This might be a little dated. So this is the example of what we would tackle if we were doing Facebook, right? So we still have a nav bar to tackle. We've got a 3-column layout that we need to do. We've got maybe some more icons here. We still have to do a text input like we would have to do for the comments, but this is kind of up to you guys.
Maybe we should do a second poll again, because I'm definitely feeling I think I clicked 2, but I'm feeling the YouTube layout. I think it just has more to offer us right now.
That's fair. Yeah, now that we've got it narrowed down to those 2, let me repoll. Okay. Oh, help if I hit the launch button. Round 2 of polling. Go for it. Only one choice this time. Or you can only pick one, I mean. Well, right out of the gate, we have a pretty strong tipping. Going once for voting, going twice for voting. Well, you might not agree with all of your classmates, but it does seem like we are going to try to tackle the YouTube video page. If you would like to try and tackle Facebook on your own after class, that's totally fine. And I can definitely give you guys some extra credit points if you want to try and tackle that. But looks like we're going to do YouTube, which will certainly be a fun one for me. The only other question that I have for you guys, and I'm going to ask in a poll, I can really go either way on this. We can either, you can either try and make it like a totally passive class where you're just watching me as I'm building and then asking questions as you go. Or we can do it a little bit slower and give you guys an opportunity to catch up if you want to code along. So I can see benefits both ways. One is kind of more like watching a Twitch live stream, right? Like watching someone else play a video game. You still get enjoyment out of it. You still learn from it. But I also know a lot of you guys are hands-on learners like I am. And if you don't have the time to kind of type it and test it, that knowledge won't sink in. So I'm going to give you guys the option there. Give me 1 second. So let me launch that poll, and I promise this is the last poll we will do tonight. Stop sharing, launch this poll. So give you guys a chance to vote in on that. The first one is kind of just watch me work and we won't take breaks. And then the second one is take breaks in between so you guys have a chance to catch up. And obviously we'll still take our break at 7 o'clock.
Max.
And while I'm going, I will take breaths. Like you guys can ask questions on either one of them. It's just a matter of, taking like 10-minute breaks in between. Rain, what's up?
If we do select just watch Max, are we still going to be able to connect to the live share in case?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes, absolutely. And if I ever, for whatever reason, forget to start a live share, let me know. That definitely is not intentional. Like it doesn't slow me down at all to start a live share. That only benefits you guys. All right. Well, another close poll, but we are leaning into Just Watch Max. So I will take some breathers. If you guys are really up to the challenge, like feel free to code along with me. I don't want to discourage that, but we won't take kind of the standard length breaks that we've been taking so far. And we'll kind of work on this collaboratively, right? So just because we're leaning towards this option, I don't want you to feel like you're in a lecture hall and can't raise your hand, right? So at any point, interrupt me with questions. If there's a section that you like really are trying, or if you are coding along and you're stuck at that point, still raise your hand. We can still screen share. We can still work through it. But I'll kind of try to go through the pace of just trying to work along getting it done. And I will only offer that option if you guys promise to ask questions and interrupt me as we go, right? Watching someone else code for 3 hours is nowhere near as helpful as seeing me do one thing and you guys going, wait, how did he do that? And don't be afraid to raise your hand there and be like, can you go back over that area? Or how did you figure out how to do that? That is totally fine. Any questions before we kick off? We are going to spend some time on vocab tomorrow. We'll have our vocab sheet together. We'll have a list of terms that are already in there. And then we will spend class time tomorrow adding to that. Weekly quiz is up in Canvas. That is due Sunday, 11:59. If it says it's due at like 9:59 or 10:59 or something like that, make sure your time zone is set right in your profile under settings. But everything should be set right as 11:59 on my side. Totally my bad. I saw a bunch of chats in here. Zoom is really bad about scrolling down. If you are coding along, you can definitely create a week 3, day 3 folder. And it's going to be the exact same setup with index.html, style.css. We'll go through and create all of that. So we are definitely starting from scratch if you are coding along. If you don't have a day 2 folder, check in your week 2 or your week 1. See if you accidentally put it in there. If you didn't, chances are you just kept on working on your day 1 folder instead of your day 2 folder. No big deal. You guys don't have to turn that in. I just like to separate it out into days so that we can kind of track progress in hunks. And with the vocab tomorrow, I will also make sure that I've also got our code set up from in class so you can reference that code as we're going. Any questions before we dive in?
I just have, I actually didn't set up a day 2 folder either. So I think I kept working out of the D1 folder. Is there any way we could have a copy of like the basic code from D1 so I could save that one without like the extra code that I added on to get my other layout? Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to post probably tomorrow, well before class, a link to all of the code that I've completed so far. And that will be broken down into day 1 and day 2 and all of that stuff. So I will send out that link when I send out the vocab as well. And then that link will be updated like the next day after class with a copy of all of the code in it.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks.
Yeah. Sorry, I meant to get that set up today and time just ran away from me. Okay, so we are going to tackle, I'm going to work off this live YouTube page. I will drop it in the chat just in case anyone else really appreciates the video that I happen to select here. I am going to work on recreating this one, except I'm going to try and avoid any copyright issues. So we may find like random icons to use for these videos here. But in terms of layout, in terms of design, we're really going to try and stick with all of it. And I'm going to try and do this in the order that I would do it professionally. So right now I'm looking at this and I'm going, all right, planning. How am I going to tackle this? The first thing that I notice is that I've got my nav bar and it goes all the way across. Nav bars can be tricky, but we've got lots of items and we've got styling. So this will kind of be a good warm up for us because there will be a lot of CSS in there to pull all of that off. I will say that I'm not going to target mobile responsiveness on this page yet. Now, some of you may be saying, what is mobile responsiveness? Well, you notice that when I drag this window out, it looks all pretty much the same, right? But when I start to get smaller on my desktop size, you notice that sidebar just disappeared. Well, that sidebar didn't disappear. You can still access it down here. Well, why did they do that? Because now there's not enough room on the screen for that sidebar to show up. So we will be learning about mobile responsiveness. That is certainly coming in our curriculum. However, I think it would be a little too much to tackle for this. And while some people do what we call mobile first design, they design their website to be mobile and then they target the desktop. I find in my professional development, it's more easy to start with the desktop size screen and work your way down. That's totally media queries. That's using different breakpoints in the grid. There's a lot of different ways that we can get to mobile responsiveness. But for right now, I'm going to target the screen at this size. And this is what we're going to try and target on the recreation. I may skip this store section so we can get down into the comments and play around down there because there's a little bit more interactivity down there. I will also say that I'm going to skip kind of like I'll get 3 of these showing up, but then I'm obviously not going to go crazy on like building out that whole list there because that's just going to be recreations. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and dive in. If you want to follow along, power to you. I will drop a live stream link in the chat in 1 second. I'm going to go File, Open Folder. I'm going to create this as day 3. And by the way, if you find it helpful to not only call it day 3, but to say something like day 3-YouTube, that is totally fine. I am not going to, well, I guess I can do a mock-up of this. Let's take a screenshot of this. And I'm going to wait for that to show up. Come on. Oh, it's on my desktop. I'm going to pop that open. It's going to open it in preview. And the first thing that I notice in here is I've got my navbar row. And then I've got a row for all of my main page content. That is broken up into a couple sub rows. I mean columns. I don't know why I just said sub row. So we're going to have a column here. And we're going to have a column over here. And then I am going to start to identify kind of where my different divs are going to be in my navbar. So I think these can go together. I think the search is going to be one giant big one. And then I've got my other icons kind of showing up over here on the right-hand side. From there, I can go one level deeper. And let's pick, we already used pink. Let's pick red for those. We're going to have our video element. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on getting all of these individual icons showing, but we will get a live video like showing up in the page and get that working. I'm going to say we've got our title area is probably going to be its own section. And then we've got lots to deal with in this bar. We've got another div to deal with here. And then let's just finish that out over here. We're going to have kind of our, like, I don't know if those are subjects or tags or whatever they call that. And then each one of these will be its own div. And we can even go one further level down. I'm running out of colors and identifying that that image is going to be separate from all of the text over here. Any questions on that? Really, I wouldn't quite call this a wireframe. This is somewhere between, you know, your mock-ups Certainly a lot of nesting. And a question that I get asked frequently is, how many levels deep can you go? Professionally, in my own code, my record is 68 levels of divs deep. That is nowhere near as deep as I have seen. However, we will learn about components when we learn about React, and that makes those levels of nesting much easier to deal with, because we're able to break them out into separate files. So it becomes a lot easier. We don't have all 68 divs like in one file, 68 tabs indented over. That would be absolute madness. But in the final version that shows up in the browser, it did actually get 68 levels of elements over. So you can get crazy with that. But when you get up to that level of development, you certainly want to use something like React that allows you to break that out into separate files. All right, any surprises here? Anyone have questions? We certainly are going to break things like this row down, but I'm kind of antsy to get into the code, right? I want to build this. I want to see what this is going to look like. So I have to create my two files. I'm going to create my index.html and my style.css. And now that I've got those files created, I can create a live share for you guys, which I just posted in the chat. And I think it was Shannon yesterday. I could be wrong about that, so I'm sorry if I'm giving the wrong student credit. But there is another feature in the live share. Give me 1 second to set it up. So I'm going to use my exclamation point enter in my index.html and just say hello world and make sure I can see my hello world. Okay, so this extra kind of, I will put in pics and titles. It may not be like the real names of the videos on that, but we will definitely load in some content so that it feels like the exact page. In live share, if you head back over to this tab, you may have noticed that you can see all of the participants, everyone who has joined the link. But if you go down to this shared servers section, you'll see it says localhost 5601. Localhost is the same IP address as this 127.0.0.1. So if you double click on this localhost, it should pop open in Chrome with the with my copy of the code. So this can be really helpful because you can not only see what I'm coding, but then you can go see my version of the browser in case I don't have that open. If I don't have that exact page open in my live share. So this is just another tool. Does anyone have any issues opening up localhost? You should see my hello world pop open in the browser. Was anyone able to see my hello world in the browser? Cool. So that's a great pro tip of being able to open that and being able to follow along. Okay, so let's dive in. Stalled enough. First things first, I'm going to change my title tab so I don't forget about it. So I'm going to say YouTube, and then I'll say, throw that in there. This is a vertical bar, by the way. It's just a nice way to separate characters out. That's the shift and the button under delete. You'll learn you'll use that character a lot more once we get into JavaScript. So I come over here, I make my YouTube, I make sure my YouTube brick Astley is showing up. And of course, I wouldn't even attempt this without Bootstrap. So I'm going to go to Get Bootstrap. I'm going to go to my docs. I'm going to go down to number 2. I'm going to go ahead and grab this entire link tag, copy it, come back over to my head and go ahead and paste that in. I save. I make sure that my hello world has changed fonts. And before I get too far ahead of myself, I want to link in this style tag as well. So I'm going to do my link, my rel first, because I always forget to do the rel, and then the href to my style.css. I'm going to close that out. I'm going to grab my style.css, drop it down at the bottom, and I'll target my H1 just with a color of red. That was interesting. Okay, but we're good to go. That turned red, so I know my two files are linked. So I can delete this out, delete out my hello world, crack my knuckles, and get into work. You may notice my prettier is also running, trying to help me out here. Just see if you can see me a little better if I move. No, okay. The sunlight is just killing me. That is not any better. Okay. It's fine. You've all seen my face enough at this point. Do you really need to see any more of it? Okay. I'm going to keep going. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to my preview here. I've got 3 major layout components. So I am going to spend a lot of time getting this nav bar together, but I don't want to lose track of basically the first and second row and just getting these columns set up so I know that I can add into it later. So I'm going to come into my body. I'm going to put everything in a div class container fluid. Why container fluid? Because this page goes all the way to the boundaries. It doesn't matter how big my screen is. I want my content to fill up the whole screen instead of being centered and having some white space around it. So I put in my container fluid. In general, it's a good idea to use a container whenever we're using the row and column system. So I'm going to say row, and I'll just throw in nav bar here to get started. I'm also going to need my div class row for my main content section. And I'm going to leave myself a note here that says main page content under nav. And I'm going to do probably a col 9 to get started. And I will say this is going to be my video call. Say maybe main video call. And say video goes here. And then my other one is going to be a col 3. And that's going to be my list. And I'll say thumbnail list, just so I know what I'm tracking there. And maybe I want to get a little bit more explicit. So I can say end main video call. And thumbnail list. Go ahead and save those, come back over to my browser. And I've got my nav bar, and you may notice my nav bar is up right against the edge of the page. That's because I didn't put a column in this row. Technically, whenever you use a row, you're supposed to have at least one column in it, but you don't absolutely have to do that. And that's why this video goes here and the nav bar doesn't line up quite yet. But I've got my general layout in here. I'm feeling pretty good about that. I think we can dive right into the nav bar. Any questions so far? Hopefully no surprises. This should hopefully be an overview for you guys. So I'm going to go back, look at my page. The first thing I notice is this menu icon. And I really don't want to use emoji. So I'm going to practice what we did last night. I'm going to head over. I'm going to do a search for Google material icons. I'm going to get this material symbols, and notice right at the top of the page, I get my menu. That is exactly what I want. So I'm going to grab my menu. I'm going to go down to the static icon font. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to head into my nav bar. And before I even throw that in there, I've got to look at my preview. It looks like this might be a 3, a 6, and a 3. And we can play around with that as it goes, but let's try starting there. So I'm going to do a col 3. And I'm going to drop in oh, nope, sorry, forgot. I got to drop in my link tag in the head first. And now that I've got the link tag in there, I can go back over to my span tag here, copy it, paste it in my first col 3, save, head back over to my page, and I've got my menu icon showing up there. I am going to see quickly if I can just do Okay. So I'm going to kind of just hack our YouTube logo together. So I'm going to say in here, I'm going to do a div for an ID of logo. And then inside of it, I will say MaxTube. So I'll save that. I come back over to my page. MaxTube is not showing up in line. Now I could make this a span element, but instead what I'm going to do is target my logo ID, because I'm going to do some additional styling inside of this, but I'm going to say display inline. And you notice that gets it back up exactly to the spot that I want it. That is a way to override the divs. Instead of saying block level, flow them down the page, I can say, hey, display them inline, make them show up going across the page like a span element would. Question so far? Okay, so I want to get my nav bar really feeling like a nav bar. And even though there's no line down here, I want to put in a border just so that I can make sure that everything is lining up and feeling just the way that I want it to. So I'm going to add a ID to my row called navbar. I'm going to target my navbar and add a border on the bottom of 1px solid gray, just so I can see where it's at. And that is right at the bottom. And now I want to play with some margin on the top and the bottom. And we can actually probably just do that as padding. So let's do padding top 10 pixels, padding on the bottom of 10 pixels. Okay, that's feeling better. Now my MaxTube is too close to my menu icon. So I'm going to target my logo, and inside that logo, I'm going to add some margin onto the left. Why margin instead of padding? Well, both of them would achieve the exact same thing, but we use margin to kind of push the item away from another item. So I'm going to say margin left. Let's try 20 pixels. That got it down a little bit, which is what I want. And now we're going to learn something that we haven't covered quite yet. When I hover over this, you see how I get that background in there? That you may think requires JavaScript. Can you do that in the first logo target? What do you mean, Jen?
So you got the logo target up on top and then you targeted the logo again on the bottom. No, I'm talking about up in your CSS.
Oh, good call. Yes, that is very bad code. You should try and combine all of that together. Thank you for calling me out on that. That achieves the exact same thing. Okay, so I want to try and get this hover effect working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an ID onto this called menu. And down in my menu, we're going to use something called a pseudo selector. So this is only going to apply if the menu is being hovered over. And for that, we're going to add a background of light gray. I save that, I come back over to my code, and now when I hover over it, I get that light gray. Now that looks very ugly and nothing close to what I want, but this is a pseudo selector that's saying only apply this background styling if we're hovering over the menu. So because I want the background area to be bigger, I'm going to add padding around the whole icon. Let's try 10px. And what you'll see happens here is as soon as I add it, all of a sudden everything jumps. I'm like, oh, okay, it's not quite what I want. Well, why is it jumping? Because this padding of 10px is only being applied if I'm hovering over the menu. I want that padding to be there all the time. So I'm going to add in another selector without the pseudo selector and move my padding inside that. So now I get a nice breathing room. If I hover over it, I get that gray area. But two things that I notice are missing. One, I don't have rounded corners. And two, can anyone see what else I might want to fix?
The pointer, the cursor.
The pointer. I've got a little select icon there, and I don't want people to select my menu icon. I want people to click on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a border radius. And if you go for a really high number here, it will automatically round everything out for you. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to come back over here, hover. I now have my rounded effect. And I'm going to tell it, hey, when you are hovering over my menu icon, use a cursor of pointer. So I come over here, I hover over that, and boom, I've got a really nice effect. It all seems so simple when you see it actually work, isn't it? It's like, man, can't believe it's that easy to pull something like that off. Okay, I'm going to see what's going on with my MaxTube here. That's sitting a little bit lower than what I would like. So let me look at my row. I think that's going to be a baseline issue. Let's see what happens. I actually don't know how to fix that, so bear with me. I'm going to target my logo, and I'm going to say font weight, and I'm going to go all the way up to 900, which is as bold as you can go. And just for the sake of testing, let's see if we can find a font that's similar to the YouTube font. So I'm going to go to Google Fonts. And a cool feature you can use in here is in this area, it says sentence. You can actually type something in like the word YouTube and see what that word would look like in all of these different fonts, which is kind of a cool touch. And I think you can even do it. Will it let me do it in bold? No, probably not. That's okay. Let's find one that feels a little bit more, actually, get fancy, call it MaxTube. I don't know, maybe something like that. Let's pick this. Doesn't really matter, right? All for the sake of learning. So I've got my link tag. I'm going to go ahead and copy. No, I'm not going to copy. Watch out here. This is loaded from what we did yesterday. I don't want yesterday's font. I want today's font. So I'm going to hit the minus button on this. Then I'm going to go down, and I think the extra bold, I think this is going to look, or maybe not. Maybe this looks closest to the YouTube video. So I'm going to select extra bold. I'm going to come over and copy this. I'm going to go to my CSS, and I'm going to go ahead and paste that in. And I'm happening to put it above the material symbols only because I want these pre-connects to happen before we go out to the Google Fonts API. Then I'm going to grab my font family here, go into my logo, and go ahead and paste that in. Now, okay, so that put it in there. Obviously, we want that to be a little bit bigger. So let's play with some font size. Maybe say 18 pixels. Let's try 24. 24 feels right. Now I want that to line up with my menu icon. So let's see if I can. I'm going to play around with this in inspect to see if I can get it where I want. So I'm going to click in here, and I'm actually going to try something a little hacky. I'm going to try negative margin. Doesn't look like that did anything. -5 px, no good there. And padding top, -5 px, nope. Okay, so that was a strikeout. This is proof that I am doing this live. I want to figure out, I think there is something with the, let's do a search for CSS text baseline. In case you aren't a font nerd, there is something called the baseline, and that is basically where the font, where your text will sit. So that normally sits at the bottom of the div because that's where we put our text. But I kind of want this icon to line up with this icon over here. And right now, the bottom of this icon is lining up with the bottom of my text. And I want that text to sit just a little bit higher without having to modify the padding on this. So if I do, there's something called vertical align, and this is cool in MDN. MDN is like the more official documentation that's used instead of W3 schools. If you click on these different options, you can kind of see where the icons move around. So I'm going to try vertical align and a couple different options in here. So I think I'm going to have to do that on the col 3. Let me vertical align bottom, top, middle. Nope, that's not doing anything. Okay. Let's try it right on the logo. Let's say vertical align top. Ooh, we got a little bit of movement there. So let me try middle. Middle is not what I want. Bottom is not what I want. Text top? No, neither of those. Well, that actually looks pretty good. If we do a vertical align of top, and then let's say we add on the margin top just 2 pixels. Okay, margin's not doing anything for me. Try padding on the top. Interesting. Okay, so our vertical align is overriding both our padding and our margin, which is kind of interesting. So what I'm going to do, I think that's a pretty good alignment for us to play with now. We could always come back later and decide that we want to tweak with the CSS, but right now, almost an hour into us creating all of this, all I've got is an icon and a YouTube icon. Sometimes that's the way this goes. So I'm going to go back over to my CSS, and because I was playing around with my logo, I know that vertical align is what I want to do there. So I'm going to find my logo. I'm going to do vertical align and make sure it lines up with what I have here, which is top. I'm going to save that. And let me just try one more thing. If I come down here. Yeah, see that padding isn't doing anything, and that margin isn't going to do anything because we've got that vertical align. Very interesting. Okay. Yes, I know I just spent 15 minutes trying to get text to be 3 pixels higher. Sometimes that's how this goes. Any questions of how we're going so far? Is this what you were expecting? Let me ask that. Are you finding this helpful? Are you finding a way to turn off the camera and take a drink of something alcoholic before turning it back on? This is what it takes to build a site. Cool. Glad you guys are finding it helpful. We won't quite go as far as asking if it's enjoyable. We'll leave it at helpful. Okay. Cool. So let's keep going. I'm not going to focus on getting that play button icon in there. You could totally screenshot it and use an IMG tag. That's totally fine. But I think this is going to be very interesting to recreate because we've got a lot of icons and we want to be able to click into it. Oh, sorry. We want to be able to click into it. I'm not going to quite pull off this animation of having like that search bar, search icon show up. But I do want to get my input working and get the clear and the search and all of that stuff showing up. So let's go ahead and give that a try. I'm going to go down. I've got my col 3, and this might be helpful to say this is the menu icon and logo, just to leave ourselves some notes. And now I'm saying, all right, let's go all the way back to our preview. We've got our main search bar showing up in here. this is what we're going to tackle. And I think we'll have enough to deal with if we just do the clear icon, the little search icon, and we'll skip the microphone icon just for the sake of being able to get to the rest of the site. Goggin, what's up?
Just to align the text, remember we were messing around with it. I think if you do a vertical line super will work.
I didn't even know super was an option.
Oh, well,
Oh, beautiful. Very cool. I will have to read into that later tonight. Learn something new every day. Cool. Thank you for that suggestion.
I was just looking at it right now. I was like, oh shit, it's just maybe one more thing there.
Cool. All right. So I need to figure out where my search bar is going to go. We know we want it right in here. But again, most important thing before we before we put in any new divs is finding where we want that div to go. So why did my camera decide to go down like that? That is annoying. There we go. All right. So I find this col3, I click on the div, and now I've got like 3 divs going on here. I'm getting lost myself. So that's okay. That's when I take a breather and have the computer tell me. I click on this div, it tells me it's done down here. So I'm going to say end of menu and logo div. So I can do my div class col6. And I am going to start out with putting an input with a type of text. That's the most important thing that we want to show up here, right? So I come over here and I look and I've got my input there, but it's nowhere close to where I want it to be. So I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to say, this is my search bar, search input col. So I'm going to go down to the bottom of my CSS. I'm going to target my search input col. And in my input, in that search input col, I want the width of that input to be 100%. I save, I come over here. Okay. That's looking pretty good. Maybe it's a little bit too big. So maybe let's try and cut, let's in the search input col, let's put some padding on the left of, I don't know, 50 pixels and padding on the right of 50 pixels. That will give my input area less space to expand into. So I come over here and now I've got my input. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Instead of just shrinking the 100% down to like 90 or 92, why did you add the padding instead?
Great question. So I think we're going to run into some things we've got to think through to get this X to show up and to get the search icon to show up. So I just did that kind of as a placeholder for now. I could have shrunk down the width. And you know what? Now that I'm thinking a little bit more about it, I think we're going to have to shrink it down a little bit more. So I'm just playing around with that right now just to see where it works. I'm actually going to try, I'm going to focus on, I'm going to add my border of 1px solid, and let's just go for dark gray. If you were really curious, you could actually inspect in here. That actually looks like a lighter gray, doesn't it, than a darker gray. Let's just try a light gray in there. Light gray. And I'm going to look in here. That gets our box around everything. So let's actually take this padding out. I'm kind of just playing around right now to figure out where we can get our box looking right. Maybe we end up doing margin on that so that we push that in. So I'm going to do, on that search input col, I'm going to do a border radius. Let's try 30 pixels. Okay, that looks nice and rounded to me. Now I'm going to, let's get our search icon and see if we can use that to line things up. Material symbols, we'll say search. We'll grab this search icon, we'll copy it, we'll paste it into the text. And I come back over here. And now my search bar doesn't have enough room to show up with the search icon. So I am going to shrink this down. Let's just leave it at 75 now and see where we get. Okay, so now we've got room for both of them. My icon isn't quite where I want it to be, and neither is that input. So I think if we target the input col and put some padding on the top of just like 3 pixels, let's see where it moves it. I'm gonna go in, find that col, and then I'm gonna, in my padding top here, I'm gonna try and bump that down. And it looks like that's about centered at 3px. What really needs it is that search icon. If I add some padding to the top of that, let's try 10 pixels. Interesting. Now that's moving everything down, which is certainly not what I want. Can we get away with trying margin instead? I bet you that's going to do the same exact thing, isn't it? Yes, it is. So we got to play with our vertical align again, which is kind of annoying. Although I'm curious, let me try one more thing. What if we change the font size of that to like 28 pixels? No, we still run into issues. Okay. Vertical align. Let's try that super option. Sub option. If we do padding on that now, I think it's not going to work, right? Because we've got it. Okay. Top. Middle. Bottom. Oop. You know, that bottom doesn't look terrible, does it? Is it still a little off though? Text bottom. Text top. To be completely honest, vertical align is not something that I have a ton of experience with. When we say bottom looks the closest, so we'll leave it at bottom now and then play around with that later. Everyone cool with that? Cool. So I have to make sure I'm putting that in the right spot. That is going to be our search icon. And I don't want to target all, well, maybe I do. Let's start with saying in the search input col, target all of the material symbols outlined and do a text align of bottom. Save, come over. You little more. Why are you? Didn't I just have that in here? Or is it vertical align? Sorry, it's supposed to be vertical align. Vertical align bottom. Okay. Now we've got our input in here, but what do we notice about that? We've got this nice rounded area showing up, but then when we go look at our actual input, there's no input box around this up here. So that's what we want to actually get rid of. So in order to do that, it's actually probably along the lines of what you're thinking. If you say border, we've always done like 1px solid or 0 or whatever. In here, we can actually just say border none and save and come back over here. And when we click on the input, we get our little box. But our box is all the way up at the top. I'm wondering if we do a width, a height on that. Can we say height 100%? That's not going to work, is it? No. Okay, let's try and specify an actual value. So if we do 30 pixels. Darn. Oh, you know what? That's because I'm on the search. Try this again. Height 100%. And now it's moving my vertical thing along. Proof that this happens, right? This is Peter Griffin playing around with the CSS, trying to get things to align. If I leave the height as 100% there, which is getting the effect that I want, when I go back to the search and change this to middle or even top, no, if I change it to middle, super, sub, okay, interesting. If I leave this on sub, which I think means below the baseline, and I set this to 100%, notice my search icon is bang on where I want it to be. And if I click into it, now I can type. That is perfection. So now I have to make sure I can recreate that in my code. I come back over here. I say the vertical align in this is going to be sub, and the input height is going to be 100%. So I save, I refresh, my search bar is exactly where I want it to be. And now I click in here and I get my input.
Okay, so quick question. Sorry.
No.
So what you're doing in the inspect element, it's not actually changing anything when you come out of there, but you can like use that to play around with properties to know what you need. Okay.
That is exactly it, because we can play around with all the properties here, but then we keep on clicking back and forth, right? This is a quick way to figure out what values that I want without having to constantly switch back and forth. The price that I pay for that, though, is once I get it exactly the way I want it, I got to remember what I changed and then go put that into my code. Those are great questions. Keep those questions coming. Last thing that I have here. Oh, yep, go ahead.
Yes. So I am doing a little bit of on myself, like naming them by my, like, on whatever I can think of, I'm like input, search, whatever. So
Sure.
I'm not following yours. You have too long of a name. I can't remember that. I can mess it up. So I'm just using my own name for the tags.
Yeah, that's fine.
Tags.
Okay, so the last thing I notice when I'm in YouTube and I click in here, I don't have that blue box around the input. And if I click over here, I've got that. But we're kind of confused, right? Because we said border none. What's going on there? This is weirdly called an outline. An outline is a specific border that shows up only if you are in a text input and it's active. In other words, the cursor is inside of it. So in order to fix that, all we need to do is say outline is also going to be none. And now I get rid of that box. Okay, so let me go back and look at what we're dealing with here. We've got an X at the end, and then we've got to deal with our search icon. So I'm going to go back to my material symbols. I'm going to find my, let's see if it's under close. Beautiful. I'm going to copy that span tag. I'm going to come down after my input and paste it. And I come back over here and boom, I've got my close. But we've got something interesting. If I hover over that close, I get the same exact effect if I hover over my menu. So the non-dry approach would be to find everything that we did for this hover and just copy and paste it and do another ID. But we want to emulate this exact same effect. So instead, I can't use an ID because I want to use it in multiple places. I'm going to call this button hover and make it a class. Now, as soon as I save that and come back to my code, now my button hover is broken here because I need to go back up to my menu and in the class add something that says button hover. I come back over here, I hover it. Now that effect is back, and that means I can take the same class, add it onto my close icon, and when I hover over this, I also get that same hover effect. Now, why I don't know, my padding isn't working, which is interesting, and I think that's because of my vertical align. But I don't know how to approach that. So I'm going to just leave that as is for now. Okay. nearing the finish line. We could get our nav bar done before break, and that gives us some time to get the video working as soon as we get back from break. So I'm going to target this search icon now. I'm going to go find in my material icons, my search. Oh, that's kind of interesting. There's a search here and a search here. Okay. Let me just copy this search icon. I'm going to put it after the close. And I see that it's there. Now I want to pull this in a little bit because that bar still feels too big for me. So I am going to add in, let's see if I can, if I add in, I don't want to change the width of the column, because if we change the width of the column, then the other column over here may be offset, right? Changing column heights are okay. Changing column widths cause some problems. So that's why I lean into using some padding on the left and the right to kind of bring the whole thing in. So I'm going to take my search input column. I'm going to find that in my CSS, which is here. I'm going to add some padding on the left of 50 pixels and padding on the right of 50 pixels. I save. That definitely brings everything in, but look, that broke where my border is. And I think margin is going to cause problems as well. Maybe not. My input. My margin does appear to be working, but I'm afraid of what that's gonna do. Let's try it. Let's try it like this. You guys love nesting divs. What if we say this is an ID of sizer, and we put all of the content inside that sizer? Then we take this margin out and target the sizer and make that width, let's just say 80%. Okay, that's shrinking it. And then can I get away with just putting a text center on this? No, because that's throwing this off here. And I feel like that's going down the wrong path. Goggin, what's up?
Why is my search bar is not aligning? The same issue that you had, I guess. I don't know.
Once I made my input a height of 100%, I had to make sure that all the other elements were vertical aligned sub.
So the input has to be 100%, height 100%.
That's what I did, just so that you can click in anywhere here and still get your cursor.
Okay. Okay. Let's try that.
So I'm gonna try my input. Let's try. My padding didn't work on that, right? We tried that. Padding left 100 pixels, because that's gonna break my border, isn't it? Yeah. I really don't want to do margin. Okay, let's try this. Let's take this whole div, put it here instead. Close that off. And then make the search input call height also 100%.
Max, if you do the input, you know, your main div where your
Mhm.
search bar and input is. If you do that padding 5, like it works, it centers it, both of them. That's what I did right now. It worked.
Okay. Yeah, I did I do padding on them? No, I've got mine vertical aligned. What I'm working on is trying to shrink up that text input size. Or have the whole bar take up less space. So I'm wondering if I do a width on this now. Let's say 75%. That works. And then in here, can I do a margin left auto? I promise I will explain everything that I'm doing here as soon as I get it to work. And then on this search, or I guess on the search input, padding the left of 20 pixels and then padding. Okay, so that's exactly what I want. Okay, so here's what I ran into. In this col 6, I didn't want the content of this col 6 to take up the whole page. So let me show you what this looked like before. Okay, that's really, really broken. Take this div out. Okay, so this is what it looked like before. And yeah, we've got to fix this area over here. But the problem is I don't really want my input to take up the full col 6. To be able to see where that col 6 is, you can hover over it in here, and we can see why that col 6 is so big, because the col 3 is on this side. This col 6 is going to start right where this col 3 left off. Well, I don't want that col 6 to take up the full width of the col 6. But if we change the width directly on the column, we can break the other columns that may come after it, because we're fiddling with the width, so the other column may not have enough space to show up. So what my solution was still leave the col 6 in there, but take the styling, everything that we did to that col, and move it into its own div. So the 6 will still take up the 6 amount of spaces, but inside of it, we can cut down on the width of it. So we can say everything inside this col 6 should only take up 75% of what's in the col 6. Does that make sense? So I come over here. Now my whole input is only taking up 75%. But if I hover over that col 6, look at where it's taking it up. It's taking it up overall on the left side. Well, I don't want to really center all of the text. I really only want to center this the entire search input in that 75% space. In order to do that, we can use margin left and margin right on either side and set it to auto. Auto is a really cool thing that will balance it out and give us that exact centering effect that we're looking for. And then finally, we can come in and add some padding on the left of, let's say, 10 pixels. And that gets our search icon off of where it needs to be. So I click in here, I can do everything that I want. The last thing we need to do is style our little search icon here to look like our little search icon right here. So I'm going to put this whole thing in a div, which will make it easier to target just the search button. I'm going to make sure that, oh, that broke things. That search button needs to be a display inline so that it displays where we want it to. I think our input needs to be a little bit bigger to push that over to the right. So I'm going to go find wherever my search input is. Which is right here. And let's try and bump that up to 85%. Too much. This is actually where we could use a calc, which we've already learned. Okay, I think that's where I want it to be. Just try. Oh, I'm going to go ahead and use a calc on that. Let's say calculate the width as 100% minus, let's say 100 pixels for room on either side. Okay, I got really lucky there. 100 pixels was just a guess. Now for our search button, we can set a background color of gray. And we can say that search button should take a height of 100%. Darn, that's not going to work on me, is it? Because it's displayed inline. Or because it's displayed vertical align, I think. And that search, I've got, it won't take up that full space. Okay, let's try this. Let's take our whole search button and move it outside the search input col. Darn, that's going to cause problems too. All right, let me put that back. Interesting. Can I do padding top -3 pixels? Margin on the top? Oh, it's gonna move the, oh wait, I'm on the wrong search input button. Margin on the top of -3 pixels. No, I'm not gonna be able to do padding either. Interesting. If I go here and take my padding off of this, I still don't get to the top. What if I vertical align this at the, oh, vertical align this at the top? Text top? Super? Up, text top. Ooh, if I do it super, and I take out the padding. We're so close. Can I add padding on that if I see, like once I get that button exactly in the right spot where I want it, it's going to push everything out where I don't want it. Amberlyn, I tried negative margin and that didn't work. And that's definitely a hacky approach to it. I am thinking that it will actually be better to take this whole search button out of the search input col and put it outside of it. But then I need to make sure I gotta remember how I did this. My col 6, I put padding, I put margin on the right side. So if I take that margin right off, it's not centered. But that search button is displayed line block. If I do inline, that's still not going to get it up there. All right, we're going to just leave this as is because I think you guys will get more benefit out of continuing on building out the rest of the page. So I'm going to come back to this search icon and just take out the background gray, which is very clearly wrong. And we're going to just leave it like that. And then the last 3 things that we'll do.
I just have a quick question before we move on from that.
Oh, yes, please
If
do.
we wanted to get that line on the left of it, we would just add like a border left to it to put a line in between the search and the close.
That's what I'm dealing with. That's the problem. If we do this search button and we say like border left 1px solid gray, the problem is that line shows up, but it's only the height of that little search icon. And so what I'm trying to wrestle with is how do we get this div, this search button, to have like that full height? And the problem is that because we've got everything else vertical aligned here, I can't just tell that to be a little bit higher. And so that's what I'm like trying to fiddle around with. But I think you guys are going to learn a lot more by getting down here and doing the video and all of that stuff. So there's definitely a way to do this. It would just take a lot of fiddling for me to get it right. But yes, theoretically, you could just do that border left. And you could, like, even if we play around with this and we're like, we want it to be a height of 30 pixels, even that isn't going to work out the way we want it to because it's displayed inline. So if you change this to inline block, that's another approach we can take. That actually might, let's just try, if we do that as 40 pixels, now it's not lining quite right. Because I think we put padding of 3px on the top. So if we take that out, we're still not lining everything up quite right just because of the text align. So CSS is a slippery slope where you just have to fiddle with it enough to get it to work. And if I can come up with a solution for you guys, I will definitely share that. I am going to add in our, what did we do our hover on? Our button hover. Say button hover on this. Save on that. And now we got our nice little search effect showing up. I'm going to just throw in the plus icon here and the bell icon. I'll leave my profile icon out. Go ahead on break. I'm going to finish out this nav bar. That's just 3 more icons. That shouldn't be anything exciting. And when you come back, we will tackle getting a video element working and figuring out how we can try and tackle some of this this down here. Sound good? Be back from break at 7:25. And I'm around just in case anyone has questions. I'm just going to finish out these 3 icons.
I have one question.
Shoot.
So, like, what if we treat this search bar as an entire row and do the search button as column 1? Will that?
You could. I would be worried about having to override the padding of the columns because the columns have little gaps between them. So you would have to override the columns. And I would also be worried about the column eventually getting too small on a smaller screen. I know we said we weren't tackling mobile responsiveness, but this is actually an argument for when you really need Flexbox, because Flexbox would let you kind of specify that the text input should take up X amount of space or the most amount of space it can. And then here are the other items in there. So this is really where Flexbox would probably help you out the most. But I think our vertical align is kind of shooting us in the foot. And I definitely could get it. I just don't want to spend 20 minutes in class when we can, clearly be learning more from the stuff down here.
Absolutely. Like later down the line, can you give us a little how many different display properties can be get through with CS, like inline flex and all those? Like not necessary right now, whenever you have a moment later on.
Yeah, I hesitate to teach this because a lot of people tend to get lost in like what the display property is actually doing. I think inline and block are the two where it's like, okay, I can understand what they're doing, but then you get into like inline block and it's like, well, it behaves like inline, but lets you write the same CSS properties that block properties do. And then you're like, well, why wouldn't I always just use inline block? And it's like, oh, that's a really good question. I don't know. But there are other things like flex and grid that we won't get into just because I think people get a little lost with that. But I do believe I have Flexbox Froggy in the additional resources, and that's a great way to learn flex and the different properties of it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Rain, what's going on?
I actually, I'm glad you said Flexbox because I literally was just going to mention that to you. While you've been doing this, I've been inspecting the actual web page for Rick Astley. And I noticed that in their style, they originally was going to use Flexbox and then it was crossed out and they used, hold on 1 second.
CSS grid?
I believe it was CSS grid and then they use, hold on, I'm just trying to go back to that part of that container. Hold on 1 second. So I literally just clicked off it. Okay, hold off on what I said because it's so much HTML on the actual web page. I literally just had it up. It was justify, grid, and flex that they use, but I want to say it in the correct order that they used it. So yeah, give me a second. I just have to get back to that point. Oh, there we go. Okay. Justify content, grid, and then they use display flex for the search in that part.
Yeah, so justify content is a flex property.
Okay.
And so I hesitate to teach flex, although this is the perfect use case for it. Because it does give you the ability to like align elements in relativity to the other elements, if that makes sense at all. So it's definitely a very powerful thing to learn, just something that I hesitate to get too far into.
Okay. Will that be the same for style scope as well? I'm
I
literally
have no idea what style scope is.
okay, excuse me. I'm just looking at everything they have for the search, but okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Max, how you get rid of the line around the text box? The border. Like I know I got the border rid of, but when you click on it, it comes back up.
Outline none.
I was like, I was close. I didn't want to do.
Rain, did you have a question?
I need to lower my hand. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Outline none.
Have we taken on like a monster with this one? Should we have done Facebook?
No, this is good. It will go a lot quicker once we get down into that video section. Nav bars are always the hardest thing to build.
Okay.
Here we go.
And Max, I pointed out earlier in the chat that that's the main, if anything, you've shown it takes practice and several attempts for dimensions and everything else. So
and the fact that I may have dementia in order to be able to build something like this. No, I'm just kidding. The other thing that I will throw out is this is probably more revealing as to how we build all the other projects. And the fact that I've built them all before, I have the code that when I'm referencing them, because while I think this is an informative experience for everyone, and I think that I hope that everyone is getting something from this, I think it also shows how hard it can be to learn from a senior developer, especially one who's on the job, has to get this job done, but also needs to train a junior developer on so that they can learn how to do something like this, right? So even though this is a very slow going experience and not an engaging experience for you guys, hopefully it shows you what it takes in the real world to build something like this and give you the opportunity. There is something called pair programming, right? Where they're all different variations of it. Sometimes you will have a junior developer working with a senior developer, and the senior developer is just sitting behind you and telling you what to do. Sometimes I do that when you guys code share, right? I circle on your screen, or I tell you what to type in and do it from there. Sometimes you shadow a senior developer, which is exactly what we're doing tonight, right? Where you're not getting any objective in, you're just watching me as I go, and you're kind of playing it out and seeing how it goes. And those little questions too. Tara, you've been on the point on it tonight with those little questions of like, well, what exactly did you just do and inspect there, right? Like, why are you doing that? That is a great question. Those little details of, I've seen people like highlight and move text before, and I'm like, well, I didn't know you could highlight and move text like that. And now I do it all the time, right? So just sometimes watching and just being observant can be a great way to learn. The good news is I do think that the rest of the site is going to go a lot quicker. And then we can decide what we want to do tomorrow, if we want to keep on working on this, or if we want to dive into that Netflix project. So we can decide that tomorrow. We definitely will spend some time on terms tomorrow. From there, we'll decide if we want to keep on going on this or get started on our Netflix project. And then we will have our weekend and spend time on Monday finishing up Netflix, tackling our portfolio, and then, believe it or not, we will be done with HTML. Any questions before we dive back in? Rain, what's up?
I'm keeping up with you, but when I go live, my screen looks totally different.
Let me go ahead and do a screen share. And if it's a one quick thing we can fix, great. If not, I'll stay on after class and we can try and catch you up.
Okay.
Okay. So the problem here is that you didn't name your file index.html, you named it YouTube. So if you go ahead and click on that youtube.html, it actually should, in your browser, click on the youtube.html. That's actually a link, and it should pop open to your page. And you really are keeping up, because that's identical to mine. Good work.
I'm just typing. All right.
Does anyone have any concept questions that we've done so far? Vertical align, I'm not going to lie to you guys, is a property that I haven't really used a lot before. And I think that that's where our there's a phrase called a sticky wicket, which is like the hardest part, or like the step that you get stuck on. And I think that that's been our issue so far. I do want to throw out, because a couple people mentioned it right after we went on break, there is something called Flexbox. Flexbox is another display property. So far you've seen me use display inline, where we wanted to take those divs and have it just show up as a div next to the other divs. So we did display inline, and that got the job done. However, there is a very powerful CSS display property called Flexbox. And the reason it's called Flexbox is because it allows you to quite literally flex the size of your divs based off of the box model that we've been using so far. And one student was smart enough to go, well, we can inspect on YouTube and see what they're doing over in YouTube. And YouTube is using Flexbox. And Flexbox is kind of a new level of unlocking CSS power and potential. However, I hesitate to teach Flexbox out of the gate because it also leads to a new level of confusion among some students. While Flexbox is very powerful, I find it has a steeper learning curve than other CSS concepts. But once you get over that learning curve, it certainly unlocks a new level of power and potential and things that you can build. So in the optional assignments, I actually have shared a link to something called Flexbox Froggy. And Flexbox Froggy is a free tool. It's not, it's a lot more basic than Free Code Camp, but basically it tells you about what these flex properties are, and then you need to align these frogs onto the lily pads. I will say that levels 1 through 20 are pretty easy, and then the last couple of them are very, very hard. But it does give you an idea of how you can move content around in a 3-dimensional space. So if you are really vibing with front end work, if you are really feeling like front end is you get halfway through this cohort, or you get all the way to the end, and then you go, I want to level up my CSS skills. I really want to be able to build a site from scratch. Flexbox is a great thing to learn. It's just something, unfortunately, because of the steeper learning curve, that we don't have time to cover in this curriculum. The other thing that I will say is there are multiple ways to build everything, right? You can see we're looking at this nav bar and we're like, yeah, this looks pretty good. However, I could build this entire thing with Flexbox, have entirely different code, and have it display the exact same way. While there may be better versions of code than other versions of code, that doesn't mean that that code is the one correct way or the only way to do it. And so we've been playing around with vertical align a lot, but if you were using Flexbox, chances are you wouldn't have to even use vertical align, and then you could use things like padding and margin and all of that kind of stuff. Same goes with the display inline versus display flex. There are lots and lots of ways of building this, and the most heartbreaking part of all of this is you get all the way to this point and you realize that that gray background that we were trying to add to this search icon may not work with vertical align. And you need to go back through and rebuild the entire section of code with a different CSS approach. And you guys have seen me play around with that a little bit, right? When I was in here and I'm like, well, I want this col 6 to be a col 6 to take up that in the full row, but I don't want the content inside of that col 6 to really be the full width of the column. And so what did I have to do? I had to refactor all of this, take my search input col, move that into its own div, and that's what allowed me to play around with the width, right? So I do think the rest of the site, I'm hoping the rest of the site will go a little bit smoother in terms of getting items built out, but I do want to just preface that of, you can see it takes an hour and a half for me, who is, I don't want to say an expert with CSS. I may be an expert with JavaScript and a couple other things that I teach. I would never claim to be an expert with CSS, but as someone more familiar with it, that took me a full hour and a half to build out, and sometimes that just happens. Goggins, do you have a question?
Yes. So what is the icon called? The box one, plus icon.
It is called add box.
Okay. And how I did text end, but it isn't all the way to the end. What did you do to put it all the way to the end?
Be very careful that your col 6 does not have the width adjusted on it. make sure that the thing that has width adjusted on it is a div inside of the col 6. Because
Oh.
what ends up probably happening is that you shorten the width of your col 6, which means
Yeah.
that last col 3 is now it isn't getting pushed over all the way to the end like it should be.
Okay. Kind of get it.
So
Oh.
if you notice, my col 6 takes up like the full space that it should, but then
Yeah.
my search input col is the thing that has the margin on it that's kind of pushing it in.
Mm.
And
Okay.
it's what has the width set on it.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah, that's a really hard lesson that you learn of never adjust the width of a column directly. You can adjust the width of the items inside the column or make another div, but the second you play around with that width property, you're essentially breaking CSS and not having it be the width that it needs to be. Was there another question? I saw a hand go down. Rain, what's up? Oh, you're still on mute.
Hello? Okay. As an experienced software engineer,
I drink a lot. Oh, excuse me, that wasn't your question.
well, it's gonna be in it. So would you say that you had to be as efficient with design, graphic design and layouts as you are with your coding? Or is it that some people are more experienced with design and layout and mockups, and then you have your more sufficient coders who may not be good at that, and vice versa? How does it work? Do we need to be all round, or some people have their own?
That is in the running for my favorite question of the cohort so far.
Okay.
That is a fantastic question. There are people who say that they are, so the line that you're asking about is between designer and developer, right? If you want to sum it down into just 2 words, it's designer versus developer. And sometimes some companies will have a job title that says like website designer and they still want you to code it. But for the most part, the industry agrees design is what you do in Figma or Sketch. It is the wireframing, it is mocking it up. However, when you cross that line over into coding, that is when you are a developer or an engineer or anything like that. There are people who say that they are equally good at design as they are at code. I would call 95% of them a liar. There are only 2 people that I have met in my professional career that were equally as good at writing front-end code as they were at writing back-end code. What that meant, as equally good at writing front-end code as they were at designing. They were a very level skill set. That is such a unique blend of skills that I call that person a unicorn. Right? It is so rare to see someone who can design and then go have the magic behind the design to actually go code it out. That is really, really powerful. However, there is a bounds to your skill set. And the 2 people that I'm thinking of, great designers, great developers, not great at the back end code, not great at being able to implement something full stack. And that's okay. I will freely tell you that I am a terrible designer. I source all of my inspiration from another website and make the website look like that one. Or I heavily rely on pre-made components like bootstraps, or I use a framework called Material UI, which is very similar to Bootstrap, pre-made things that you can pull in. It's very rare to have someone as equally skilled at design than it is in development. And at a bigger company, that's not a problem, because at a bigger company, the project manager will sit down, will come up with all of the requirements, will hand that off to a designer, and that designer may not know a single line of code, but they'll do everything in Figma, they'll get everything done, and instead of handing it off to a developer they hand it back off to the project manager, who may turn it into a prototype or may go back and say, hey team, you guys needed this software. Does this software do everything that you need it to? And there are a couple revision cycles with the designer. And when the designer is done, then it gets handed off to the developer, and the developer goes and implements that code. That's in a perfect world. That's when you're working at a bigger company, right? However, you may be working in a smaller company where they don't know the difference between HTML and CSS. All they know is they need a website. And at that point, as a developer, you can say, hey, my design skills aren't quite as strong. Maybe I go out and I find a template, or maybe I show them a bunch of different websites and, you know, try to put something together in Figma just so they've got an idea. Or you could get to the end of this cohort, and this has happened before with a lot of our students. They get to the end of this and they go, turns out I don't want to code, but I want to take all that knowledge of coding and knowing how all of these pieces work together to make better informed designs, and go continue my education of learning how to use Figma, and, you know, learning how to do client work, and maybe do entrepreneurship, and learn how to write contracts, and they go out and they become a solo UI designer. That's totally fine, right? All that we care about is that you guys are employable and you get a job after the cohort. We don't care what the title is. And sometimes people get to the end of this and go, thanks, now I know what to think about in my design. I want to go do UI designs for 30 years and then retire. Great, right? We have no problem with that. But I ask that question all the time, because at my company, we try to cover two skill sets. So we either hire full stack developers who can write front end and back end code. And when I hire them, I say, are you better at front end or better at back end? And anyone who says both, I go, yeah, okay. Which one do you like doing more? Oh, no, I can do both of them. All right, then show me your code. And you read through their code and you go, no, this person's a front end person. Their CSS is beautiful. They can write this in 3 lines of code. The interface is gorgeous. And then you get to their back end and it's like a train wreck. And you're like, okay, this person says they can do back end. I don't know, you know, that's not their specialty. The same goes for that front end. When we hire a front end only developer, we try to find developers that have some design talent. And what I have found personally is that it is much harder to find a good designer who can also code than it is to find a good developer who also happens to do design. I find the design is way more important in that skill set if you're trying to find both than it is. It's more important for them to be a better designer than a better coder. That's what I'm trying to say. But that is a balance that some jobs will require you to strike, and a very important question for you to ask in an interview to say, hey, what do the job roles look like here? Do you have a designer on your team that I can work with? A lot of companies will say, we don't have a designer on staff, but we contract with a designer, where they're basically saying, when we need design work done, we pay a flat fee. They do that work for us. They send us the designs, and then we hand that over to our development team. And that's a full-time team that goes out and builds it out. So a good team will certainly have a designer on it. But again, just totally depends on company size. And a lot of smaller companies, or if you're doing contract work, a lot of people will hire you as a website developer and say, well, I want you to do the design, and not understand that website design and website development are 2 different skill sets. And that can be a really hard thing to explain to someone of, heads up, yeah, I can make a website for you, but if you're starting from scratch, you really need a designer. And that's where you can either hand off that work or collaborate with someone, or decide that design's what you want to do and kind of go from there. It's not impossible to do both. It is certainly a very popular thing to do both, but it is certainly 2 different skill sets.
And you've only met 2 unicorns.
I've only met 2 unicorns that were as equally good at front end code as they were at their design. I've met people who are decent designers and better coders, and I've met people who are better designers, and I've seen both sides of it. I've only met 2 people that were like balanced right down the center and rock stars at both of them.
Thank you so much for your explanation.
That is, in my own opinion, that is my own experience. There are certainly other instructors and other people who would not agree with that assessment. And it is a very common thing to see in a job description that they're looking for both. But then that's a question to ask them of what % of my time will I be designing and what % of my time will I be writing code? They may say we only require you to design 20% of the time and everything else is just adding on to existing pages and updating text and images. And that's also a thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But there is job descriptions and job titles are not created equal. And those are all very great questions to ask. Goggin, what's up?
Can I screen share and show you the issue that I'm having with the box?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, hold on. Should I
there's
do
some-
the code one or the?
Try doing desktop 1 just so I can switch between both of them if I need to,
Okay.
or desktop 2, whatever. Okay, and can you bring your browser over to this monitor so I can see what's going on over there?
Oh, hold on. So when I try to do that, the box it just expands instead of just like
Okay, so do you have the ID on both of them still?
I only use class to attack them somehow. Right here, you see the call 6.
So the first thing I'm going to yell at you about is your indentation.
I messed it up right now because of hold on, because I was trying to fix it. So I messed it up a little bit here.
You should be able to just save it and have pretty. Why isn't your prettier running? Ooh, let me just make sure you've got format on save. Turn that one on, and then the default formatter. These are things we set up yesterday on the second half of class. Okay, so now whenever you save, Prettier will automatically run for you.
Okay.
So that's one thing. And then we've got your box, your search, your input, your close, your search, and then the closing for the box. Okay, all of that looks right, which means it must be an issue with your CSS. And so my search input column, which you call box, I did a width of 75%, which only makes things worse. But your input is using things that I didn't use, like inline block. So I think, like, I also have a calc on mine. So your code is differing enough from mine that I can't do a quick fix on this. But if you want to stick around after class, I can take a look and see if I can help you.
Okay. In the meantime, I'll try to fix it a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. If you have my live share open, look at my CSS and kind of see what it's applying to, and then see if any of that will help you get it lining up right.
Got it. Oh, all right. Let's see.
And there's some great notes in the chat. So if you don't have chat open, pop that open, do a quick read through that. It is very depressing, yes, to learn that you are not a good designer. It is the way of life. Or you may find you're a great designer and a terrible developer, and that also happens too.
I feel attacked. Also, I sent that like 10 minutes ago when you were on your spiel. But no, it is true because I did WordPress before this and I got into this and I felt so lost. Then I look back at my old designs and went, oh my God, I sucked so bad. And I've been going to every job interview telling them like, oh yeah, I can do both. And I couldn't figure out why I wasn't getting hired. And then I realized it's because I sucked. But I'm really, I'm decent at this. So it works out. You'll figure out as you go through the cohort what works for you and what doesn't. Like I did great at SQL, but some people really hated it. You'll figure it out as you go. And it's easier when you get out and you keep practicing to figure out what job works for you best.
Just one thing, when we get done with the cohort, will you, Laura, or Max be able to identify our weaknesses and strengths based on our work so we can know what to go forth with interviewing and what type of jobs, et cetera?
I would suggest that you set up a one-on-one for that. We are working on kind of figuring out what it means to be a Erie 21 graduate, a careers and code graduate, in terms of, hey, Laura's great throughout the program and getting your action plan set up and all of that. But we have heard from countless students that the Monday after graduation rolls around and it's 5:30 and everyone's like, well, what am I supposed to do with myself now? There's no class. And so we're trying to kind of formalize that certainly by the end of this cohort, so that you guys have an idea. We offer monthly one-on-ones to all of our graduates, so that if you want to talk to someone and just touch base with someone once a month for 30 minutes, whether it's, hey, I'm stuck on this code that I'm doing as a side project, or hey, I got a cover letter, I'd love to just like go over this and review it with you, or it's just, hey, I'm lost, I've got all of these resources, where do you think I should go next? Those are great uses of those one-on-ones. Or you can certainly start scheduling them, whenever you want, towards the end of the program, at the halfway point, whatever it may be. I'm kind of lucky because I get to spend the most time with all of you. And I do get vibes more than others of what you may be good at. But it really is sometimes I'm like, oh, what did you like the most, right? And it just becomes a conversation of deciding what's next. But yes, definitely use one-on-ones for that. And that's something I will definitely take into consideration to see if we can do maybe something like an exit interview at the end of the program. Maybe we make them optional, where we talk not only about like what improvements we can make to careers and code, but then like what are the next steps for you? What can we do to support you more? All of that kind of stuff. So maybe an exit interview is a good blend of you giving back to the program and providing feedback, and then us being able to also continue to support you after graduation. So I'm going to add that to my notes. Thank you for asking that question, though, and definitely one that we can help you try and answer. No problem getting off track. No, it's a program feedback pops up at different times and we want to implement it. Okay. We are going to get the video element working because I feel like that's one that everyone's excited about. So I am not going to tax Rick Astley on getting a video for us because that would probably cause some copyright issues. So instead, what we are going to do is head to a site called pexels.com. I will dump that link in the chat as well. This is an alternative to Unsplash. Unsplash is great. I use Unsplash for all of the YouTube thumbnails. Pexels is a great alternative. The reason why we're using Pexels tonight is because they also have video as opposed to Unsplash, which I don't believe does. Goggin, what's up?
Just so you know, I figured out if you just tag if you just put the right side, I named the right side, you name the logo. If you just adjust the width on that, it will like work perfectly fine.
Compensate out.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so in my in Pexels, I'm gonna go to the videos tab here, although you totally could go up to the search bar and search for something. And I'm just gonna grab some horizontal video here. We're not gonna quite tackle vertical video because that's a whole new challenge for CSS. So I'm just going to happen to take this one and hit the little downloads icon on it. And then in the bottom left, you should see that we get our MP4 showing up down here. Jen, you definitely do pick up on some attributes. So things like SRC for our image tag, or you know, adding in link rel for style sheet. Those kind of just naturally seep into your memory and they stay there. But there are things that I have to look up every single freaking time that I do them. Video is one of them, and I'm going to show you how I do that because there's no way off the top of my head I could get a video element to work without having to look at W3 schools. So there are certain CSS properties I can play around with. Vertical align is one of them where I'm like, oh, I'm just going to try all 8 of them. And if one of them works, I'm great. Probably not what you want to be hearing from your teacher, but there are certainly things that naturally seep in, and there are others that you just have to look up every time. So it's, I don't think there's a definitive list. There's nothing where I would like quiz and interview a potential employee and be like, name 38 of the most important CSS properties. And if your list of 38 doesn't match my list of 38, you're not getting hired. You know, like that would never happen. It is something that just comes with practice. Okay. So I've got my MP4 file downloaded. I'm going to go to my downloads folder and pull in that MP4 file just like we pulled in our images yesterday. And then I'm going to go ahead and rename that video.mp4. Very specific file name. Once I get my video in, true to what I just said, have no I've done video elements before. Off the top of my head, I cannot remember how to get a video to work in my HTML. So what am I going to search? I'm going to search W3 schools video. And the first thing that comes up, HTML video. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And I am going to scroll down, and here's my video. This is kind of cool. But if I keep going down, here's my example video element. This is what I want to be working on. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this whole tag. I'm going to head back over to my YouTube page, and I'm going to figure out, hey, the column 9 is where I want it to go. So I'm going to take out video goes here, go ahead and paste that in. Now I've got 2 kind of different tags here. This is if I have my video encoded in multiple different codecs or different file extensions. They're not quite the same, but for the most part, they are. I don't have my video in a different file format, and this is really only important if you're supporting like multiple browsers and you really are serving a lot of video content, takes up a lot of bandwidth. This kind of gets into the DevOps side of everything. But because I just have an MP4, that's the only thing that I want my user to be able to see. I'm going to take out my second source tag. I'm going to change my SRC to video.mp4. Notice that SRC, the same thing as a movie, as an image tag, SRC for source. I save, I come back over to my page, and now I've got this lovely video in there that I can pause and play. Shay, what's up? Oh, we can't hear you even though you came off mute. Still can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
There you go. Yeah, you're good.
I know before when we was trying to embed the image tags, we put the links on the header part, but for the video, I noticed you put it in a div. What's the difference between the two, and why did you choose to put it in the div and not on the header like we did with the images?
So the images, I think you might be mixing up. Are you thinking about the icons in particular?
Yeah, I think. With
okay.
The, row sheet.
Yeah. Okay. So three different things there. One is in order for us to use this, the icons, right? So the menu, this whole material symbols outlined, there's no, our code kind of needs to know, just like Bootstrap, that we're using these material icons to get them installed. So in order to install it, we put this link tag in here. That's on the CSS side. That's so that those icons, while they look like images, they aren't actually real images. The browser is kind of tricked into thinking that those icons are a font. And whenever we're working with fonts, it's on the CSS side, and we do it in the head tag. For images, actual images, like we did those advertisements yesterday, we would use something like a image tag like this. You know, something like that. That is for a non-icon image. That is to get a real, the logo to show up or something like that. The third thing that we did is a video. The video is kind of weird because it takes two elements to work. It takes the video tag, which is kind of grouping all of them together, and a source tag. And the way this works is, if you have multiple source tags, the browser will pick the one that is its best, that it works with best based off of what video encoding you use, ignore the rest of them, and show that one. If none of the video coding encodings are supported, instead it shows your browser does not support the video tag. And that will show up kind of in here. So video is more complicated because it basically needs to support multiple file formats, and then it's up to the browser to support which one it wants to show. So that's kind of the difference. Icons, while they look like images, are treated like fonts in CSS. Images are one tag that we link to the source. And then finally, video is two different tags, the video tag and the source tag, just so we can support multiple different encodings.
Okay, yeah, I was confusing the icons, what you said, using the fonts and the actual image tag. So that actually makes sense.
Cool. PNG photos can certainly be used. It is up to the browser to support, to determine what file formats it supports. For example, all modern browsers will support JPEG, GIF, PNGs. The newer ones will support something called WebP, which is actually a file encoding specifically for transmitting images over the internet. And Google Chrome has great support for that, but I don't know if Safari may have finally caught up on that. It's kind of interesting. There is a website, I promise to not tangent too hard, called Can I Use? And in that, you can actually do a search for something like WebP, and it will show you that, like, Internet Explorer 6 through 10 and 11 just doesn't support that file format at all. But Safari, starting in version 16, started to support it, but iOS or Safari 14 through 15.6 don't support that file format. The same goes for like the video element. I'm not sure if this will give you a breakdown of what encodings it will support. So like AV1 is supported by Chrome, but is not supported by Edge or Safari, but Firefox did just start adding support to it. And then kind of interesting up at the top here, they'll tell you that 71% of all the internet users across the globe are using a browser that supports this AV1 video format. This, fortunately, 10 years ago, Can I Use was like the first site that you bookmarked as learning as a developer. Okay, maybe not the first site, but it was very common to have newer HTML elements or features not be supported across many different browsers. So Can I Use is kind of the go-to site for that. If you're having an issue, if you have something working in Chrome and you hand it off to a client and the client goes, this doesn't work, and you say, where did you try and test it? And they say, oh, on my phone, and that's what's not showing up. Then you can go to Can I Use and kind of backtrack your code to figure out if something isn't supported. But for the most part, the file formats that you expect to work are the ones that will work across all the browsers. So that is JPEG, PNG, GIF on the image side. That is MP4s and MP3 files for audio and stuff like that. Every browser has a different file format that they recommend you use. However, serving video on the web is very complicated because it has a ton of bandwidth. So while I'm showing you kind of the native approach, most web developers will not even touch trying to get video to work. Instead, they'll upload it to YouTube and then use YouTube's embed code to drop that in their own website. And that's a great way of hosting video as well. Video can be very complicated to host only because those files get so big.
That's a bad idea.
And YouTube does support iframes, so you can basically take their code and dump it right into your code, and that video will show up. I'm kind of showing you the old school way of doing it, but video hosting video and supporting video is a total rabbit hole. Rain, did you have a comment other than what you had in chat?
No, I just heard someone else speaking and I was speaking, but I was on mute. It's not.
Okay, so I'm going to keep going here. We've got our video showing up, but it is nowhere close to the size that we want it to be. We really want it to span the whole area. So I'm hoping I'm going to get lucky. I'm going to take this height and width off and just save it. And that did not do what I wanted it to. Now we got our video bigger, which is way bigger than we actually wanted, right? So I am going to try and fix that. This, I happen to know, is going to be my only video element on the page. So in my CSS, I really hope this is going to work. I'm going to target my video element and set the width to 100%. That is kind of like using image fluid. I just don't know if image fluid would work on a video. So I come over here. We got our video in. Did not think it was going to be that easy.
Wait, so we don't have to put a dot or a hashtag on that? Like image and video elements, we can just single out like that?
You can single out anything just like that if you wanted to. So if you wanted to select every div on the page and make them, every div have a border of 1px solid fuchsia, you could select every div and apply a border to it just like that. So you can always target a name of an HTML element. You just want to be very careful when you do that, because that will then apply to all video elements on the page. So if you end up adding a second video, now all of a sudden the styling from the first video is getting applied to the second video. If that's what you want, great. Most of the time, you won't see a native HTML element selected just because you want to narrow in what that's going to get applied to. But in this case, because I know for a fact that this is going to be my only video, it is safe to do that.
Okay.
All right, so we got our video in. Do we have any questions on this? And by the way, you can hit play on this and you can modify the sound and all of that. One thing that's kind of weird is by default, your video doesn't have any controls on it. So it looks like it's just an image and there's no way to actually get this to play. I think if you right click and hit show all controls, then it will show up. But it is important to note that you need this controls attribute on your video tag in order for them to show up here. The reason why you can turn off the controls in the first place is using JavaScript. You could actually build your own interface that would be able to control that, and then you would have more control over if you wanted the play button to look like something, or you wanted to disable the ability to go full screen or whatever. You can turn off controls and build your own controls, but very convenient to be able to just put that word in there and have the browser take care of that for you. All right. Hopefully that was a surprise for everyone of how easy it was to get a video to show up. Bless you, Jen. Anyone have questions? Okay, moving on. See, when the sun goes down, I can actually see you guys, and then I just get this like vampire glow going on instead of all just being black. Okay. I am going to go back to, where's my preview? Going back to my preview.
Can I ask one quick question?
Yeah, please.
For attributes like control, we don't need to like specify anything like how we do with like our class attributes. Like some of them don't need the equal, etc. to define.
Yeah,
what
great
it needs to
question.
do.
You don't. And this is the equivalent of basically saying controls equals true. The browsers have gotten a lot better at shorthand, so that if you actually left this on and said equals true, you'll notice the controls still show up there. Really, if you set this equal to anything, the controls will still show up. It's the fact that the controls are even an attribute that really matters. So there are some attributes that you can just use the attribute name and not have to set an attribute value. That is not particularly common. I would say 90% of the time, maybe 80% of the time, when you use an attribute, you do use the equal and set a value to it. But yes, you can have some attributes without values. Good observation. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my preview, and this is going to be fun. We've got oh, go ahead.
Why is my video not playing?
Did you move the video.mp4 into your VS Code file?
Do I have to do it, or just I can just select it from the file? Oh, yeah, it is there. It plays on the VS. But it doesn't
let's take a quick look.
Hold on. Let's see. That's weird. I never actually did a video on any of the website I did.
Yeah, it's not as common as you would think.
It's weird. This is like, oh wait, where is it? Oh, sorry. Shit. Hold on.
Oh, your type should be video/mp4. Is that just hanging off, or do you have a period in there?
Wait, what happened here? Did it
go back to your code for me?
1 second.
And just scroll over. Is that a dot or a?
Oh yeah, it's a dot.
Try a slash there. I think that will fix it. There you go.
All right. Well, why did it go like this now? I just had it in full screen already.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe because of the video. If I put on this, damn. Oh, on the other side it works better. Oh, maybe
because the expanding window.
Oh, I think the video is just too big. Hold on, let me see.
Could be. You should have a width 100% on that video, and then it will bring it into the right spot.
Oh, okay. Oh, it's working now, but I think this is weird. But let me see. Let me move it back here. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna keep going. If you need help, let me know.
Okay.
Okay. So we got our video in. Now I want to target this Rick Astley section. I'm gonna just pick an H number out of the top of my hat and off the top of my head and just see if I'm right. So I'm below the video. I'm still in my col 9. I don't know. Let's try an H5 and say pretty mountains and stuff. I'm gonna save. I'm gonna come back into my browser. I get my pretty mountains and stuff. And let me just see how that compares. It looks like we've got a little bit more padding, and those little things, it depends how pixel perfect you're trying to get. I'm going to add an ID on this to say video or main video call. And then in my selector, I'll say main video call. Go get the H5 and add some margin on the top of 5 pixels. And I'll go take a look there. I don't know, that feels right. My font is a little different. I'm curious. In order to see what font they're using, you can right click and hit inspect. You might need to pull up your bar a little bit. And then you can see right here, they're using YouTube Sans as the font family. sometimes that comes up really easily, sometimes it doesn't. So if you do a search up here at the top for font dash family, it will highlight it for you and bring you right to that one section. I am going to try using Roboto just to see if that's a closer font fit, because I really feel like that's going to feel more like the YouTube website. So I'm going to go up to the top here and hijack my init by adding in Roboto as the font family with a comma. I have no idea if that's going to work, but we're going to give it a try. And then in my CSS, I'm going to target the container fluid. And I'm going to make the font family Roboto with a fallback to sans serif and save, and then head back to my site. Ew. I'm in Times New Roman and I broke my MaxTube, which means this is totally not the right way to do it. All right, I'm gonna have to cheat and go back to Google Fonts. Google Fonts, go back to here, grab Roboto, grab that, go to the regular and add that. And the right way was to add in an ampersand and the word family. So let me take this out, and in here, I'm going to add my ampersand and Roboto. And now my MaxTube is back, and Pretty Mountains and stuff. That still doesn't look like Roboto. Roboto. Maybe it needs it in quotes. You are not Roboto. Are you Roboto? Oh, you are Roboto. Wow, Roboto and whatever font Bootstrap uses are very similar. Okay. So when you are using multiple Google fonts, you can either let Google generate this URL for you or like hack away at it and add in additional pieces of information. And then it will pull in all of those fonts all in that same file. And then you can use stuff like that. I'm just curious. I don't think YouTube Sans is something that Google Fonts supports, but wouldn't it be cool if it did? YouTube. No, that's not one that's built in.
Is it sans serif with R?
Oh, thank you. Good catch. Both Allie and Brandy Lynn. Thank you. Okay.
I hope this doesn't sound like a dumb question. But when we look at the inspect, does YouTube have did they create their own font? Is that why it says it like that? Or is it
That is not a dumb question. That is exactly it. Yes, they made their own font called YouTube Sans, which goes way over my skill ability or what we will cover in the curriculum, but certainly not a dumb question. Yes, they created their own font called YouTube Sans. You'll see one called San Francisco. That is a font that Apple has made themselves. But yes, you can make your own fonts. The only reason we can't use YouTube Sans is because fonts are copyrighted, just like videos and music are. And so unless Google Fonts has that on there for us to be able to pull it in, we can't use that directly. Google bought YouTube somewhere around 2008. But YouTube Sans post states that they weren't using this font. This is a newer font that they created in the past couple years. But it's not just because a Google company created the font doesn't mean that they need to license that font to other developers to be able to use. Now I'm curious.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there. It just was killing me for a minute because I expected it to fully be in Google and I'm going over fonts over here and couldn't find it either.
Google bought them in 06. They were founded in 05. No, is that long ago? Interesting. Okay. So we've got our title in here. We've got a little space on it. What else do we have? We've got a little icon here. We've got the person's name and then 3.66 million subscribers. This to me is shouting grid system. So I'm going to go in and tackle that. I'm going to go down to my row, my col 3, pretty mountains and stuff. Okay, so I'm here. I'm going to do my div class row. I'm going to do a div class. I'm going to start with a col 2 for that. And I am going to borrow that same profile icon that I used before, just so I don't need to worry about getting an actual image in there. Actually, you know what? An image is going to be good. Let me just go to Unsplash and do a search for person, because that's specific. Yeah, you look great. Come here, grab you, drag you over, rename you to profile pic. And then in this col 2, I'm going to do my IMG. My source file is going to be called profilepic.jpg. And then right off the bat, I know it's going to be huge. So I'm going to add an image fluid to it. And then I know I want that picture to be rounded. So I'm also going to add a class called rounded. There's my person. So I'm going to say rounded has a border radius. You know, I think you can even do it like this. Let me find out. 100%? 100 pixels? No, you're gonna just try it like this. Okay. Turns out rounded is an actual name of a class in Bootstrap, and that's why it wouldn't let me override it. So when I changed the name of it to circle, that's when my border radius kicked in. But we have an issue here where it is the original image is not square, and because of that, we aren't getting that perfect circle that we expect. So the easiest way to fix that is to go ahead and say reveal in Finder. And if we double click this, we get back into our preview application that we were using to mock images up. You can actually highlight a portion of the image. And if you hold down square, it will allow you to do a selection in a perfect square format. So I'm going to just go ahead and move that over. And then if you hit Command K or go up to Tools and down to Crop, it will crop that image for you in a perfect square. So I'm going to go ahead and save that and go ahead and close it and save it here and head back over to Chrome. And now I've got my perfect profile icon showing up. That's a little too big for my tastes. So I'm going to drop that down from a col 2 to a col 1. And now we've got a nice little profile icon going on there. Head back over to Rick Astley. Now I've got another section. So I'm going to say I've got another, be careful. This is outside the col 1. We want a new column. I'm just going to guess that this is a col 2. You can see that this is largely a guessing game. In here, I'm going to do a span, and I'm going to use a class of bold and say Rick Astley. And then I am going to, actually, I'm going to do that as a div because I want these to be on 2 separate lines. Do a div class sub and say 3.66 million subscribers. Come back over here. I got my Rick Astley, my 3.66. Now all I need to do is make some changes. So for my bold, I'm going to say that's a font weight of bold. 700. And try and change this class name and see if that's going to do it. No, it's going to be a problem because I didn't bring in the font weight of Roboto for the weight. So I say weight at 400 and 700. And now I got my Rick Astley in bold. So I've got that working. I can go ahead and also make that a little bit bigger, but not by much. So let's say 14 pixels. 18 pixels. And then for the subscriber count, I'm going to just make that font size a little bit smaller at 10 pixels, 12 pixels. Yeah, it kind of feels right. Come back over here. Maybe we got our font color. Gray. And we take a look at that and what is wrong with me? Just color for font. This is the second time I've made that mistake. And that is feeling pretty good to me.
That looks
So-
good. Sorry, real quick, how do I get your version of the browser up again?
Yeah, great question. Go to the live share over on the left side of my window of my code. And then under shared servers, it says localhost 5601. Double click on that and it will pop up. Okay, we only have 2 minutes left. So I am going to stop here. Tomorrow, I will poll you guys right at the beginning of class of if we want to keep on working on this. If you guys are learning from this, if you want to keep going, I'm going to give you guys that option. If you were like, dear God, this was the most boring 3 hours of my life, please, can we get back to writing our own code? Then we can start working on the Netflix project tomorrow. Either way, we will spend some time on vocab tomorrow, going over terms, making sure we've got a list together, kind of getting in a very good routine, so that every Friday, or every Thursday at the end of the week, we spend some time on vocab. This is a great night to fill out the 30-second feedback form because I've never done this before. And you guys may have thought this was a great idea coming in. And now that you're looking at it, you are just sobbing and cannot wait to hit the leave meeting button. Or you love this so much and would like to do this another night, or this was great for one night and you're like, all right, let's go back to the old school way of writing code and following along. Whatever you decide, does not matter to me. What matters to me is you guys learn HTML the most. And I think this can be a great way to learn. If you guys want to do another day of it, that's totally fine. We'll poll you tomorrow. If you want to just dive into Netflix and go back to the old school way of me doing a little bit and then you coding along and then, me doing a little bit more and you coding along, that is also totally fine. But either way, poll tomorrow. We'll spend some time on vocab and then we'll decide what we are going to do from there. I will stick around for a couple minutes. So if anyone has questions, I can answer them. Otherwise, have an awesome evening and I will see you guys tomorrow.
Just one more question. So when you crop the picture, how did you do that again? Because I missed that.
Yeah, that's a sneaky little trick that I know. So I right click on it and go to reveal in Finder. And then if you double click on the image, it's going to open it in preview. From there, by default, you'll have this like crosshairs. You drag out the area that you want. And if you hold in the shift button, it will automatically like constrain you to a square area. Then you can go up to the top to tools and down to crop or hit Command K. That will crop it and then Command S to save it. And then you may need to manually refresh your live share and that should have the cropped image for you.
Okay, but once you crop it and save it, it automatically overrides what you previously had?
Yes, you might have to refresh it in the browser, but yes, it will override what you had. I can't wait to see if this video on YouTube gets flagged for me just having Rick Astley's face up for half the class.
Oh, you guys were questioning again today about the thumbnails and what's going on with that. Max has his own bot and it glitched. So he's going to fix that because I've yelled at him twice now. So that'll be fixed with the dates.
I don't have, my bot did not glitch. I have to manually generate the thumbnails and upload them. And when I do that, I update the name of the videos for class to make them easier to find. So all the content of them is in there. I just have to spend some time going through and updating the 2 videos that are already in there. So they will update, but the links will stay the same.
Okay, I'm sorry. So I'm at the picture right now. I'm trying to figure out like
Start dragging, hold shift to make it a perfect square.
Okay.
And then drag out the image area that you want to crop. And once you get that, the dancing gray border ants, I've heard some people call it whatever, go ahead and hit, when you let go of the mouse, Command K to crop it to that border. And then Command S to save the image.
I wonder if I'm not opening it in the right.
Share your screen. Let's take a quick look.
Okay.
Okay, so you opened it in, I don't know what you opened it in. Hold on, let me request remote. I think what you have to do is instead of clicking on the image here, like if you click on, no, hold on, Day 3 YouTube profile pic. Did that open on the other monitor? Drag that over for me if you could. Okay, this is the right version of it, which is really confusing. I think what you probably did is you clicked on, I have no idea how you got into the version you were in. What you have to do is in Finder, if you double click on the file name itself, that's what will open in preview. And when it says the word preview up in the top left here, that's how you know you're in the right one. So now you can click and drag on that image and it should give you the image that, the area you want to crop.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions for tonight? All right. Make sure I'm not behind in chat. Okay. Have an awesome evening, everyone. I'll see you guys tomorrow.